Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah. I'm the Real Simple Mama, and I pretend to know what I'm doing with chickens. So this video, to cut right to it, is going to be all about chicken food, what the different kinds are, what they look like, some complaints that I have about my experience with backyard chickens, and some strategies on how to feed your birds. Upcoming, I've also got a video on chicken diversions to keep your birds from getting too bored, which is a problem because they can get too fat. I mean, case in point, look at this one. She must be really bored. To keep them from bullying each other and starting to get kind of crazy from being cooped up. There's your chicken expression for the video. And to keep them from being cannibalistic. Did you know that chickens can actually try to eat each other, to eat eggs, to eat chicks if they get too bored? So there's that coming up, as well as a chicken winterizing video to tell you everything that I've learned. So if you're new to Real Simple Mama, or even if you're not, the way I do things is I have my personal experience, which is only about 1.5 years of backyard chickens here outside San Antonio. And then I do ridiculous amounts of research, usually at night after my kids are in bed, because I'm super cool. And I learn everything that I possibly can learn. I ask lots of questions on forums. I ask the gurus here in San Antonio in my chicken forums. And then I try to teach my viewers and my followers about here's the information about why you should do what you're doing. Here are all of the different options, and then you guys can pick what works for you. But this video actually came into being, the idea for this video, because I've got a complaint about my chicken food. So let's get right to it. Now, just as a disclaimer, this is my experience and based on my research as I scarf myself up here. It's freezing out here. And as well, what I'm going to be talking about in regards to chicken feed and the options, this is for grown-up birds who are fully feathered, so they don't have any more down. They're able to live outside, and they are of laying age, because we're not talking about grower, which is where your chicks are from, basically from birth to 16 weeks old when they're growing. That food has a higher amount of protein and less calcium and stuff like that because they're not making eggs yet. Once they are of laying age, you put them on layer food, and it's not layer food as in layers, but because your birds are of laying age. So that's the food that we're talking about. Poor Blue. She's like crouching over there and pouting. It's like, man, this weather sucks. All right, so here's my complaint really quick. And the reason I decided to try different kinds of food. So this system, this setup that I've got, obviously is not very eloquent. It's not very advanced. It's in the midst of two different things. So, hey, animal overload, I stole your idea. There's some dollar store mirrors. So I had, if you've seen my other content, I had an automatic PVC feeder here. And just where the location was and the fact that this roof isn't big on the coop, I won't go into details, but it wasn't working. So we bought a big plastic feeder from Tractor Supply. It's like, I believe it's less than $15. This bowl is because I'm also offering I'm offering feather grower or FeatherFixer, which I'll teach you about in a minute. But here's the problem. We are going to be hanging up this feeder here in a couple of days. We're going to drill a hole right up in here and have it hanging. But so you see, part of the problem is that the chickens were just kicking up dirt in here because this is a dirt bath. That's just going to happen with the feeder. That's not the fault of the food. The problem with the food is this is layer crumble. And there are two different kinds of food when you get to layers. There's crumble, which is this shape, this size. And then there's the pellets, which I'll show you in a second. The problem with the crumble is, number one, you can see my birds have just made a ridiculous mess. Yes. The second problem is you see a lot of it is just turned to dust. Your chickens can't eat the part that is just so fine that is turned into a powder. And be jealous of my Minion Band-Aid, guys. So asking around on the forums, this is one of those things where it's totally about personal preference, depending on your feeder, depending on how many birds you have. If you've got special needs birds who have maybe crossbeak or they've got some other issues going on, it's hard for them to eat. It may just depend. So this is what the crumble food looks like, and I'm going to take you over to my storage bin because I have two different kinds of food now. I have bought crumble their whole lives for my birds who have been with me since they were chicks, or as soon as they got to me. We've always used crumble, always, always, always. And since I've gone to this feeder, now I need to hang up the feeder anyway, but it's just like, man, like that's money. And for somebody like me who's really cheap, it's like, ugh. Like, I love my birds and I'll buy you food if you need it, but not if you're wasting it. So here's the deal. I asked around on the forums and said, look, what's the difference between the crumble and the pellets? Does anybody have a preference? Is it better one or the other? And like I said, it's going to be completely personal. It's a very individual decision. As I block the view of my birds. So what I did is I said, you know what? This is ridiculous. So I went and bought This is Pellets, and I'm going to open it right now and show you the difference. Now, the good news is that for most brands, for apples to apples, where like the only difference is one is Crumble and it's that yellow bag, where one is Crumble and one is Pellets, the bags are going to be about the same. Here in Texas at Tractor Supply, one of those bags that I believe is 25 pounds. Oh, just kidding, it's 40 pounds. For a 40-pound bag of one or the other, the price is going to be right around 15 bucks. So money, or one being more affordable, is a non-issue. Now, of course, if you want to get into the food that is medicated, or the food that is just organic, or the food that is, you know, whatever, then you start getting into price increases, but that's not really what I'm talking about. So we're just talking about layer Crumble, and this is Do More if you care about the brand, or layer Pellets. That's the only difference. So the question is going to be, what shape is better for your birds? Which one is going to get them to eat and have less waste? So as I stick my hand in this bag and grab a cup, Crumble looks exactly like that. And this is for, again, for grown chickens, for hens and for roosters. You don't have to have like a his food and her food type situation. Okay, so there's the Crumble. The problem is, even in that cup, and I've still got like, I don't know, probably about a third of the bag left. You start to see that a lot of it is just dust, and these bags are filled by weight. So not only am I paying for that space in the bag that my chickens are not going to eat, but like I just said, they're not going to eat it. So there's that. Then the pellets, and I'll scoop some up to show you the difference. They're really small. It's not like hamster pellets or rodent food or anything like that. Now, of course, we're still getting the dust factor, and this is the very first bag of pellets I've ever bought. But the pieces are a little bit bigger. It's not huge, but there's a difference. So now, before you go and drop 15 bucks to try to figure out what kind of food your chickens will eat, now you can see what the difference is. So the other things you can do, you can always get the food a little bit wet, but if you wet the food so that your birds can eat it, like a lot of times for birds who are very ill or who are special needs, like physically they need some help to eat, you can wet their food with a little bit of warm water. You can do that with all animals, right? With dogs and cats and stuff too, but you have to feed it to them fresh, because wet food that's been sitting out will mold, and that is, I mean, that's deadly for chickens, so you'd have to get rid of it. But that's the difference. In my experience, talking to other people, some people say that their chickens can integrate between the two. You can mix them, you can rotate them, but other people say, hey, you know what, my birds only will have this one, they won't buy the other. So we're going to experiment in the next few days, because like I just kind of implied, you want to gradually move over. When you're changing brands, to me, it's not that big of a deal. But for any of your animals, actually, when you're changing types of food or styles of food, like, you know, from just regular active to senior or whatever, you want to integrate that and change it out gradually. So not 100% this, and then the next day completely axe that and 100% this. So start mixing it. So what I'll do with that feeder that you guys saw is I'm going to start doing both. I want to see how these pellets sit in that feeder. I want to see if the girls eat them, or if they kind of just look like, what the hell is this? I don't want to eat this. Here's the good news. I know that my girls will eat pellets in concept, because I've been feeding them. Just kidding, it's upside down or backwards. This is FeatherFixer. So, and I've talked about this a little bit in other videos, only for when your birds are molting, which my 2 Easter eggers are going through a nasty molt, and then Gracie, my barred rock who just went inside, she's recovering from just being beaten up by some other chickens, so she's got some feathers to grow back. FeatherFixer is a higher protein food. These foods normally, unless you buy something special, it's usually 15 or 16% protein. That's just normal, full-grown chicken. I'm not growing anymore. I'm not a meat bird to where you're trying to fatten me up as fast as possible. I'm just, you know, just normal grown-up chicken. These foods also have a little bit of calcium in them. They have a little bit of you know, just the other nutrients and things that they need. Okay, FeatherFixer is specifically designed either for you to feed 100% or for you to supplement only when your birds are going through a molt. Now, if we're talking about pricing in this area, just so just so you kind of know, again, I'm in Texas. I don't know how much the price changes depending on where you are. 15 bucks for a 40-pound bag. 15 bucks for a 40-pound bag. 8 bucks for, I don't know how much. Let's see, it's not that much. 7 pounds. It's about $1 a pound. So as you can see, I'm not feeding that to them all day, every day. I'm almost kind of just throwing it out as a treat and making sure that my Easter eggers, making sure that my, where'd they go? That my Easter eggers get some of that food, because they're the ones who need it. You know, my other birds do not, like Lacey, she's not molting. She technically doesn't need to eat it. Now, realistically, can I keep her from eating this? No. Calypso, the same thing. My big black alpha hen, I can't keep her from eating that. So I want to just try to make sure, there they are, that I can just use that as a supplement. But it's higher protein to help them go through the molt more quickly. Quick break for you to look at a caterpillar. All right, anyway, back to the content. So I was really frustrated by the amount of waste, by the amount of times that I've been filling up that feeder that had crumble in it, because I just feel like, man, I paid $15 and, you know, it's getting dumped all over the place. That's the chicken's fault, right? Them just dumping it out and scratching it and making a mess. So I guess I had 3 concerns. The first concern was that they were dumping it all over the floor. I don't know if they're standing in the bowl or digging in it or what. The second problem was, and this is my fault, this has been sitting just up on some concrete, like some little blocks or little bricks, and it's not tall enough, so they've been kicking dirt into it, and they're not smart enough to say, oh, hey, there's just dirt on top, let me move the dirt. They just don't eat out of those sections. That's my fault. That's going to be fixed by me hanging up the feeder so it's, you know, a good 3-4 inches off the ground. But the everlasting problem remains, and let me get back in here and I'll show you. The everlasting problem remains. I felt like there's just so much of this crumble that's not being eaten, and it just gets pulverized. And it just turns, look at that, like it just turns to powder. So, and you can see on the ground that some of it is good crumble that's landed on the ground, and hopefully that'll stay dry in here and they can still eat it. You can see I've got some grit over here too. There's a zone where they can pick at grit if they want. But a lot of the stuff that you see on the ground, I mean, it's just dust. Like, even if they hadn't dropped it, it would just be jamming up the bottom of this feeder, right? And they wouldn't be able to eat it, and that made me mad. So, strategies for feeders. You can see I have a video called Coop Hacks, which is doing very well, if I do say so myself. And other than our problem with the food getting wet because of where we had it facing and it not having a roof over it, that PVC feeder that we made did really well. Your goal, of course, is that your chickens, their food has to be dry. You don't have to worry about it being fresh as far as like, you know, it's too stale and now they won't like it, because that's not an issue. But it has to be dry. It has to be dry. So wherever you are, you know, you've got to make sure. That's why this is all bagged here around the bottom. This whole thing all the way around on that half is all bagged to keep the wind and the rain. Because again, I don't care if the food is cold. It can be out in the air. It being stale is not an issue, but it cannot get wet. It cannot get wet. Chickens, you would like to think, well, they know that if it's wet that they shouldn't eat it. But if you don't check on them for a day or two, or if you just kind of glance and you don't realize, then either your chickens are going to eat wet food or they're going to starve. So, you know, sometimes we like to assume that our birds are really, really intelligent, but don't assume that they're that intelligent. Their food has to stay dry. That chickens, when they're cold, when the weather is colder, the way they stay warm, the way they create extra body heat is they eat more. Ta-da! Just kidding. They eat more. That's how they keep their bodies warm. Their digestion is what raises their body temperature. So whenever it's cold, they need even more food than normal, because that's how they stay warm, is by eating more. Which, number one, I wish that was my strategy because it sounds fantastic. And number two, you can guess which of my birds are probably always cold. Or I guess they're never cold, right? Hey, Blue. Gorgeous. That's my Easter egger who we had rehabbed for a very mild case of bumblefoot, but she's awesome. She's noble and she's intelligent, and I just love her. She's great. On a side note, Flopsy is my really nervous Easter egger, the lighter colored one who's still back by the fence. She's doing a lot better. She's filled out. She's not as scared. So they're coming around. It's been a month, but they're coming around. So, and I wonder if somebody's counting how many times my chickens have pooped on this video. So considerations again for their food is they have to have dry food. It cannot have any mold in it. So let's continue with that winter thing. So they need more food available to them. I'm going to spare you from that one. They need more food available to them when it's cold, because that's how they stay warm, is they eat more. Okay? So with that being said, you would think, oh, okay, well, when it starts to get cold, then I'm just going to buy a whole bunch of food. Don't do that, because food can go bad. It can get rancid. And of course, if it gets wet, then that money is all wasted, because then we go back to the original problem of they can't eat wet food. So going back to my storage bin, This thing, it's just an old Rubbermaid storage bin. It's been chewed on by squirrels and, you know, whatever. But it works really well. The problem is that in the past, you see now, hopefully you can kind of tell, I've got it lined with bags and stuff. When the water gets really high or it floods, see how there's mud there inside? The water actually rose up. And most of these bags, like this one is completely plastic. That's the pine. This is a huge bag of poultry grit. You know, that mealworm bag that Grandma bought these brats for an early Christmas present, you know, that's plastic. But these feed bags, unfortunately, are that, I don't even know what you call it. It's like reinforced paper, but it's not waterproof. It's not watertight. And if nothing else, there's a seam like this on the bottom of the bag, right? That will get wet and absorb water. And of course, what is the food going to do if it gets wet? It's going to suck up the water all the way up through the bag. So you can't stockpile food, even though you would think that would be like a smart choice, or if there's a sale or something like that, but it's not an option. So right now I've got 3 different kinds of food, I guess. If you want to be technical, I have the crumble, and I have the regular layer pellets, which again, the composition of the food is pretty much the same. It's just how it's cut, what shape it's in. I'm going to be transitioning them to the pellets, at least for the rest of that bag, right? And then once we're down to almost no food and it's time for me to buy more, Gracie's being a little sassy, then I will make the verdict on, okay, they seem to like this one better. So for some people, the problem is that their chickens just make a gigantic mess. Mine never have until like this week that it's gotten cold, so I don't know what the deal is. Again, part of the fault was mine because I need to hang that feeder. But for me, it's just a matter of it being wasteful because of the kind of food it is, if that makes sense. The size and shape of the food, that's what makes me mad. So just something for you to think about, and now you've seen the sizes of the food so you can kind of tell. As far as treats, really quickly, I have a few videos if you're interested on different chicken treats. I make them oatmeal. In fact, they're going to get a batch either tomorrow or Friday. Chickens can eat quite a bit of stuff. Hey, Blue. Hey, Blue. It's me, girl. Chick, 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 chick. What do you hear? No little raptors. Look at that. She's like a bearded raptor. Look at that. A glorious muff. What is it? Ooh, they hear something. They understand so much. See, like 5 minutes ago, I was talking about how dumb they are. So anyway, ooh, ooh, ooh. Something's got them all spooked. I don't know what it is. Woo! Woo, Gracie bird. I don't know what that was. Oh, girls. I make them, it's raw garlic and plain oatmeal. So it's a warm garlic oatmeal. There's no seasonings in it. There's no salt, obviously. No synthetic crap that was put on, you know, like a flavor or anything like that. You can give your birds scrambled eggs. You should recycle their eggshells, dry them out, and crush them back up to give back to them as a calcium supplement. You essentially can just recycle their calcium. I'm all about free, cheap, healthy treats. Other than the oatmeal occasionally, which is partly just to keep them warm, I don't really like to give my birds grains. I don't give them bread or pasta that much. They try to be on a paleo diet as much as possible. So fruit and vegetables you can do, and again, in the chicken diversion video I'll give you more ideas, but you can put stuff in a suet feeder. You can hang stuff from a screw hook to give them something to do. But all treats and non-chicken food, non-foraging stuff, like stuff you bring out to them, kitchen scraps, that kind of thing, should be easily less than 20% of their diet. They shouldn't be getting, you know, a whole bunch of stuff every day or anything like that. Now I've got mealworms and black oil sunflower seeds in here. That's kind of more of a protein type treat, and then I give them vegetables sometimes. I very rarely give them fruit. Garlic is a good antibiotic, and just to help them out with just their immune system and things like that. So different ideas that I've got here on my videos for chicken treats, chicken snacks that you can look at, but definitely look online before you give them something new, just to be sure. Watch their poop as well. If somebody's got runny poop, it means they've, well, I mean, it could mean that they have something going on. It's kind of like us. If we eat too much junk, then our digestive system kind of says, hey, whoa, hold off on that. So if I can see that their poop is too runny, as far as the consistency, it's not sitting in a solid mass, you know, it looks more liquid, then they don't get anything special for 2 or 3 days, because I got to make sure that it was only the food that was causing that, right, and not anything else. Girls. Chick, 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 chick. Hey, Blue. Hey, pretty girl. So there's the different kinds of chicken food in a nutshell, or an eggshell if you wish. again, you can look for my chicken diversion video that'll be up here by the end of October 2018. The winter chicken video will be up soon, and that's going to be an extensive video because I'll teach you all kinds of stuff about chicken physiology. But anyway, there's the differences on the different kinds of food. I'll update after we get through both of those bags that I showed you to kind of say, okay, here's the verdict, here's which one I feel is less wasteful, this is my personal opinion. But the good news is, other than it being a trial and error, there's not a price difference on either, so you can test what you think may work for your feeder, for your setup, and everything like that. So, I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama, and these little girls are about ready to go up to bed, and we'll be back soon with more content. Let me know in the comments what you use, what you like, what questions you have. Thanks!